Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lunchtime Lecture Series. I'm Jaime Correa, the Director of the Undergraduate Program in Architecture. Tonight, or today, we have Alexia Leon, who was born in 1970. She received her professional degree from the Ricardo Palma University in Lima. Her first job in the year 2000, called the Mori House in Playa Bonita, Cañete in Lima, was one of the 6 finalists in the Mies van der Rohe Prize for Latin American Architecture. In 2006, she established her own studio, and in 2009, she was nominated for the Marcus Prize for Architecture and received a UFI research grant from the MAC Center in Los Angeles. 2007, Alexia Leon was invited to teach at the Graduate School of Architecture in Harvard University. In the following year, in 2008, she was selected by Herzog and de Miro to participate in the Artist Weiwei's Ordos 100 Master Plan and Architecture Initiative in Inner Mongolia, China. In China, she was also invited to participate in an important exhibition called Crossings, Dialogues for Emergency Architecture at NAMOC in Beijing. 2011, she founded a parallel practice with Lucho Marcial. The name of their professional practice is Leon Marcial Architects. And it is important to stress that Lucho has also joined her for the current online studio at the School of Architecture of the University of Miami. Their vertical house in San Isidro, Lima was nominated as an outstanding project in the inaugural Miss Crown All Americas Prize in 2014. That same year, they won an open competition for the National Museum of Archaeology of Peru in Pachacamac in association with Paulo Dam and Jose Canciani. She received the Swiss Architecture Award in 2015. Alexia and Lucho have lectured in several universities in Peru and abroad, and they're both sharing the responsibilities as our current online visiting critics. Please welcome Alexia Leon and Lucho Marcial.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, good morning. We are very, very happy to be here. I would like to thank the University of Miami for this invitation, especially the Dean Rudolph El Khoury and Jaime Correa. We will share this time 8 projects that we have worked in Peru over the last years. For us, design is an act of housing specific realities. We are very interested in the possibilities that could bring a project as a tool for constant research. It is so important for us that the process of design raise consciousness of specific realities. The content for us define the form and the how of the design, and this creates possibilities for human environments integration. We are also interested in the physicality that informs design and how architecture returns back with a renewal physicality. Design has the agency to restore social and physical degradation in a daily basis in the reproduction of life intertwined in territories, surroundings, and atmospheres. So we are interested in how architecture transforms these life places at different scales. So we are really sure that architecture has this capacity to create connections, repair disconnections between inside, outside spaces, and with these, retake, restore, make good, compensate, lost relationships between landscapes, connecting dispersed scales for coexistence with nature and natural ecosystems. So the first two projects are located in the Peruvian coastal desert in Paracas district, Pisco province, Ica department, 3 hours south of Lima Center. Over the last 4 decades, the process of littoralization has steadily increased the number of urbanizations linked to the Pan American road infrastructure development. So land was acquired from both local town councils and from communal organizations, thus obtaining the right to the water, sewage, and electrical services, entrance and exits, to be later offered as individual plots on the real estate market. This speculative model is often massively developed at large urban scales, putting in danger protected environments and diverse existing natural ecosystems. So the first project is located inland, and the second one in the Paracas Bay. The project creates a new oasis on a triangular site in the desert plain, very near to the Paracas Bay, a protected natural area with valuable ocean ecosystems and archaeological remains. So this residential urban mantles looks towards the sky. Oasis Paracas architecture developing 18% of its potential density, creating a diverse and accessible horizontal landscape for the district and for the nautical community. A desert garden oasis on 22 hectares of arid land. It is a system of 258 patio garden houses on one-level houses in the center, and a residential belt of 2-story houses is woven together with ponds, shrubs, and cover ground plants, providing shade and food for local wildlife. A dynamic system of pedestrian pathways and small squares create connectivity between the different parts of the urbanization. These paths organize the electrical and sanitary installation of the entire urbanization, whose capacity is expanded depending on resident occupation. Likewise, the garden extends and it is irrigated with treated water from the main sewage. This new topography responds to the very specific local climate, consisting of an average of 22 degrees Celsius, almost always sunny, with little rain, but tempered with very cold and strong winds that fluctuate between 25 to 60 kilometers per hour, often transporting sand and dust inland. The fragmented nature of the houses as a collection of separate structures allows for the oasis to enter within the limits of the private property, thus blurring the limits of private and public space, and at the same time gives the owners the program flexibility in the future. The section of the fragmented structures of each house impacts the whole urbanization. The inclined roofs allow for the cross-circulation of air, humidity control, and the regulation of natural light, building a new landscape for cohabitation between the built and unbuilt environments, attracting migratory birds and desert animals. The second project faces the Paracas Bay. This is the nautical club that is conceived as a space for meeting between professional and amateurs worldwide who share the same nautical Olympic goals. The project departs from the strategy also of urban oases, constructing a large central space open to the skies and contained by independent buildings. You can see the nautical club here. The project follows the natural slope of the elongated lot, visually and physically joining the desert pampas to the sands and waters of the bay. Its architecture of interrelated, independent constructions creates a central space for collective gatherings, protected from the southwesterly winds. The lateral independent volumes are programmatically interchangeable, and between them create walkways and small gardens for unexpected encounters. An aerial volume, a structure as a long beam that spans transversally with regards to the sea, creates a threshold between the interior desert garden and the pool area, liberating the ground for shaded eating and resting areas that can enjoy both landscapes. A transition space is proposed between the pool and the beach, stepped sand terraces with vegetation that connects the club's users with the bay and its water path. These unbuilt platforms also act as a second entrance and liberate a significant front portion of the lot, thereby extending the neighbors' lateral views towards the bay. The lateral volumes are inclined in plan in the direction of the prevailing southwest winds and create pedestrian connections between them and the central space. The project proposes the same construction sections for all of the lateral volumes, a section which impacts the entire project. Sharply inclined roofs that allow for the cross-circulation of air, humidity control, and the regulation of natural light. All the volumes are painted in white to help reflect the intense radiation of the desert sun and vegetation, and bougainvillea climb the walls up to the roofs by a system of cables, reducing visual glare at ground level. Housing hills. We want to share this Anden house that is located in Los Cóndores. This is a completely different specific reality, no? Is part of an outer district of Chaclacayo, 27 kilometers east of Lima, in the valley of Rimac River. This urbanization takes advantage of the dry ravines to bring water from the Santa Eulalia River through the acequia that cross the Angeles Chosica upper hills for planting to create an oasis, a vision of the architect Benavides in the 1940s. As a visionary, he created an urbanization based on the understanding of a specific climate, which has a wonderful weather, warm and sometimes rainy summers, usually sunny the rest of the year with mild temperatures between 14 and 20 centigrades, and the coldest month in June and July at 12 centigrados. This culture of gardening linked with architecture is alive today as a place for gatherings and recreation within the surroundings. But this peaceful paradise sometimes changes with the event of huaicos in the ravine, torrential rains occurring in the high mountains, now especially with a phenomenon known as El Niño, so that increases the hydraulic flow of the river, mudslides and flash flooding capable of destroying streets and even houses. So the architecture of this house is placed strategically to dissipate the possible effects of a huaico, and thus creates a garden which is made of platforms or andenes. The Andean house lot is the result of a subdivision of a larger plot and is situated 650 meters above sea level and surrounded by hills. The project built a series of terraces on the existing topographical slope in order to retain rainwater and thus plant trees, flowers, and also grow vegetables and stabilize the soil. The perimeter wall in this sloping terrain creates open outdoor spaces where one is connected with the profile of the hills that surround the house in all directions. In these open exterior enclosures, the trees provide shade and regulate the wind. The main sloping roof rests on the concrete perimeter walls, which retain and reflect light. One moves from front to back of the lot, connected by a cover exterior stair placed underneath the house's sloping roof. The bedrooms are also connected directly to these patio enclosures, a lateral courtyard that bring the northern light. Although the site for this house is an unusually small lot for the Condores area, the project connects both front terraces and rear yard, making them completely accessible from the outside, creating a connection between pedestrians and main hills. This is another specific reality, housing the vertical had to manage density in consolidated districts of Lima. So high density and vertical expansion are part of the urban transformation happening now in these districts of Lima, especially in San Isidro and Miraflores neighborhoods, which traditionally organize their housing and public services around a network of inner or linear parks, malecones, also connected through three-line streets open to the public life, are experiencing spatial fragmentations today. These common public spaces still have ecological and recreational relevance today. Nonetheless, real estate business during the last few decades has produced an architecture that sacrifices these collective values in favor of speculation, often sacrificing much of the urban culture of creating connected and accessible landscapes. This urban density has installed itself in the city without considering the climatic changes that it produces and without a concern for the evolving public cityscape. As the cold waters of the Humboldt Current come in contact with Lima's warmer air, the thermal collision of the two creates a dense layer of humidity over these neighborhoods that face the Pacific Ocean. This 500 meters high cloud is restrained from dissipating due to the proximity of the Nervi Andean range to the east. The oceanfront district received garua, very little drizzle, but no rain at least 7 months of the year, 1,230 hours of yearly sunshine, generally mild temperatures, and extremely high humidity. So architecture for collective housing not only implies conversations and decisions with clients above private life, but also the possibility of how private spaces might interweave with their environments and vice versa, so that both may benefit from each other in the practice of daily life. The third project is the vertical house that proposes a densification in the vertical axis. The house not only builds up, but also down. The project begins with an excavation which creates a patio visible from the street and which serves as a work studio, an area for public gatherings, organizing the different levels of the house. The ground level of the house is an extension of the street and sidewalk. The vertical patio of irregular height connects the interior of the house to the street, to the European cedars, and to the pedestrians. The house is vertically arranged at different levels, an enclosure facing the large patio, a terrace facing the pedestrian sidewalk, a balcony, an elevated terrace, and a roof patio. These different levels relate to the trunk, the branches, the leaves, and the top of the trees, respectively, relating the inside spaces to a diverse outside life. The spaces of the house collect light not only from their one horizontal facade, but also capture overhead light through vertical teatinas, taking advantage of Lima's diffuse light. The glass facades open entirely, sliding into the only opaque horizontal structural walls of the main street elevation, which act as bracing for the post-tension floors. Additionally, the facades at levels 2 and 4 return perpendicularly from the street to become part of a lighting and ventilation system that works in tandem with internal vertical patios. These spaces diffuse the limits between what is public and private, inside and outside, while allowing for clear vertical and diagonal spatial connections. The next project also challenged a vertical axis. This is a multi-family building. This building excavates a large patio, displacing its built mass from the street's edge diagonally towards the back of the lot, thereby interrupting the regular street profile. This creates a large void giving onto the street, Victor Maurtua, a void which benefits the building itself, the streets, and the neighbors in front. The pedestrian sidewalk extends at grade through the interior of the building until reaching an interior patio at the rear of the lot. In general, a system of open spaces, of patios and terraces regulate the density of the 4 dwellings, connecting them to either the street facade or the posterior patio. The result is a series of 4 patio houses stacked vertically, all whose spaces are illuminated and ventilated naturally. The 2 duplexes arranged on the lower and upper floors create voids and terraces within the building, ensuring that not only their own adequate light and air, but these unbuilt spaces also benefit the 2 apartment flats located in between in the center part of the building. It's a kind of compensation to the whole in return for their privileged size and position. The building structure located primarily on the perimeter of each flat or duplex allows for future distribution changes and new ways to connect to the exterior voids. The building is vertically sustained with 7 primary seismic plates and avoids the use of columns and beams that will interfere with its flexibility. These structural plates are consciously placed away from the folding corners of the facade, allowing the interiors to open diagonally onto the building's void and street. These interiors, absent of a structure, become balconies for the users of the building. Open horizontal platforms are contained by a green textile-like banister that wraps around the entire street facade, reinforcing the geometric folds of the structure. The balcony building, through its particular series of setbacks and voids, allows for different relationship between the public and the private and the urban fabric itself. Alcanfores building is located in Miraflores and tries to recover the balconies, the vegetation, flowers, and the value of exterior living, now almost extinct in collective housing in Miraflores. The project breaks with the confine of its legal perimeter, creating a public plaza for egressing to the building, while increasing the perimeter surface of its facade. This plaza, while technically private property, becomes a part of the street and plants a tree in coordination with existing street vegetation, while also creating a buffer from fanning traffic and its closest neighbors. The unbuilt space of the lot defines the geometry and the character of the building. All of the building's flats and duplexes have contact with the city and give directly onto the street. Within each apartment, all of the living spaces, including the bedrooms, give onto balconies overlooking either the Alcanfores street, the Fanning street, or the small plaza. The building, through the placement of its spaces and balconies, which offer varied views of the city, places value and faith in living in contact with the street. The creation of the plaza and displacement of the building mass over the entrance solves this problem and structurally divides the building in 2 parts, allowing each part to move independently. Even more structurally significant are the building balconies, a combination of balconies as extension of the interior space and deep planters for vegetation, which project over the entrance space and the street's facades. Where these balconies occur on the facade, defines the interior, public, and the private areas of the apartment and acts as a natural visual and acoustical buffer from the street. The Alcanfores building does not exhaust or build all of its allowed square meters, and that generosity is, we hope, felt in the urban context. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the building with its desert vegetation and abundant, fast-growing salvia morada is attracting hummingbirds and bees, creating a small microclimate at the intersection of two main streets in Miraflores. Lucho, your turn. Okay. So, housing system. This is another specific reality we want to address, especially thinking in adaptation, in how to bring flexibility, connectivity at different scales. So for us, technical systems belong to a field of knowledge necessary for societies and their building of the planet. Techniques relies on social, economic, and political networks to challenge situations in permanent conflict and improve life through integration. So each of the following projects proposes building systems which rely on design that depends on reciprocal and collaborative relationships. Both the people involved and local material conditions determine how these specific technologies will contribute to the building system. If building systems are to aim at transforming territories, their technical systems must undergo a process of adjustments and prototyping, editions that explore numerous physical possibilities. These reiterations and actions deals with space, with structure, and materiality. The next project is the National Museum of Peru that starts from a public competition, national public competition. So the National Museum of Peru infrastructure was the result of a lengthy process of dialogue and collective decisions between interdisciplinary professionals and the Peruvian state. We had worked for over 6 years. So the MUNA, the museum, is located to the west of the intangible area of the archaeological sanctuary of Pachacamac, located in Lurín Valley, a territory that registered approximately 3,000 years of occupation of indigenous cultures on its margins dedicated to fishing and agriculture. So the archaeological sanctuary of Pachacamac shows through its architecture a lengthy historical process of transformation of that territory that includes the late formation, regional developments, Lima culture, Wari Empire, Ichma culture, and the Inca culture, and thus becoming the most important pilgrimage center of the central Peruvian coast connected to the Andes by the Inca road system, Capacñan. Today, the archaeological preexistence of this oracle coexist with the social fabric of the urbanizations that surround the sanctuary, creating a new contemporary landscape. Julio Cetello, Villa El Salvador, looking to the Pacific Ocean, to the islands of Pachacamac. So the Muna sit here in a degraded area. So the Muna is conceived as a new Andean cancha, an infrastructure that weaves and integrates these two landscapes where the coexistence of the past and the present is evidenced in a continuous process of discovery and negotiation. The infrastructure renews spatial possibilities and collective exchanges by offering dynamic local interactions. The accumulation of these architectures is evidence that in Pachacamac, Lurin, culture is in the process of ongoing construction. The Muna here inscribes a large flexible quadrangular cancha with a large interior void. A clear and compact volume in the existing arid hollow of this specific desert landscape formed as the result of the extraction of sand for informal construction purposes during a 30 years period beginning in the 1960s. The intervention stabilizes and restores a degraded and vulnerable space occupying the excavated area, and by doing so, creates a space between the museum and the surrounding dune without either touching the existing dune nor surpassing it in height. The project opens its main visual towards the archaeological sanctuary of Pachacamac and its coronation in the Temple of the Sun. The site museum, the seacoast and the islands of Pachacamac, the Urpihuachac Lagoon, the wetlands, and the agricultural landscape and the desert of the Tablazo. The lateral views of the museum are of the dune and the void separating the two, the nervy urbanization of Lurin, Villa El Salvador, and the urbanization Julio Cetello. We have been thinking a lot in the Temple of the Sun, in these solid platforms. But for the museum, we really want to understand lightness for integration. So we think a lot on how to design a system that is focused on the space between platforms. And these spaces would create the conditions for different programs that the museum required. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank the University of Miami for being here. I'll continue a bit. I know our time is limited, but I will continue a bit by explaining the siting of the building and the main building strategies. As Alexia mentioned, the building orients itself not to the Pan American Highway, but it orients itself to the larger, I think the larger physical events that are happening, which has to do with the dunes, it has to do with the Temple of the Sun, it has to do with the islands of Pachacamac. One of our main concerns was limiting this nearly 1 million square foot infrastructure, 100,000 square meter infrastructure, limiting its impact on the site. And in doing so, the building builds 70% of its square footage underground. So that's what we're seeing here. So it's this degraded site that was used as a mining to take the sand away for materials of construction use. So the building nestles in that place and builds down from there. Here you can see the amount of site, the amount of building that is built down. The main quadrangle is 126 meters by 126 meters, with an additional technical building that we're seeing here on the left side of the screen. That would house the parking and the more technical rooms, air conditioning and such. One of the decisions there was clearly to separate those activities, like parking, that we thought would one day eventually disappear as public transportation became more prevalent, along the Panamericana Sur. So, and also there was an idea of not putting combustible materials below the museum itself. So we separate those two buildings. Just very quickly, one comes in at grade, one ramps up very, very gently and comes in at grade. At this point, below grade, we have the permanent collections, the storage areas and research facilities. At this level, we have more the temporary collections, the education institution, and above we have what we would consider the more social functions of the building. So as one comes in, one is looking down into this void. There's a center void, which is 25 by 25 meters in plan and also about 25 meters in height. Here's other relationships. Very important for us was not surpassing the existing dunes. So as from Villa Salvador and Julio Cestello and the neighborhoods that do look out onto the Pacific and the Pachacuac Islands and the Temple of the Sun, most importantly, those views would not be interrupted by this new infrastructure, which, as I mentioned before, builds 70% of its mass underground. So these are the sections which are very important for us to respect. And then we begin to see the building. So I'll go through the plans very briefly. As I mentioned before, it's 126 by 126 quadrangle that is inscribed in this already excavated site. These are the technical levels. You have 4 patios in the corners, which are the lungs for the building through which we bring air in, this humid Pacific air, which we then dehumidify to about 30%, and then that air is recalibrated, filtered, cleaned with the correct humidity and temperature put in for the different collections. The archaeological collections, include everything from metals to ceramics, textiles, human remains, which require different conditions. Here's an image of what those galleries look like. So if we went back a moment, that would be an image, that would be a photograph from one of these corridors which link and then allow us to connect to the floor of the museum itself, which is, instead of having false ceilings, we have false floors, albeit concrete, that would allow for the display of cases and being able to allow us to get to installations, air, electricity, security, and those kind of things. So that would be an image from there. Here we're looking at the ground level. From the section, here we have the access to the secondary building and parking, which also acts as a buffer for the buses, the tourist buses that would come to visit the museum, the entrance to the museum, to the temporary areas, the auditorium, office, education services on this level. And here we would have that 25 by 25 void in the center, which goes down into the permanent collections below, and the auditorium, which acts as a stair to the social services on the second level. So here we have an image of the building in relationship to its land. We have this slightly over 5-meter base, and then we have the light, which we'll explain a little bit later, the light concrete facade that regulates air and wind. Here we're seeing images without the landscape still. So this is a polished concrete facade that has been polished in a way to seal it from humidity from the outside. The relationship with the dunes, these would be the gardens. As one moved around the back of the museum, the relationship between the parking pergola and the entrance of the museum. Again, the structure that we're seeing on the left is really a support for Bougainvillea. I think it's important to comment that all of our floor slabs, 100% of our horizontal floor slabs are about 4 feet thick, which would allow for the placement of earth and vegetation. So even the parking structure itself would eventually be a support for bougainvillea, which is very common in this area. Okay, here we're looking at the -1 level, which is the research facility, and cutting through the vertical patios that do bring light, aside from the central area, to the permanent collections below. So this is where you would have the researchers working. As I mentioned before, you have the 4 lungs of the building that bring in fresh air to the building. And here we're seeing the parking structure on the side. Here we're down at the lowest level of the building that the public can reach. The main exhibition space, which is almost 90 by 90 meter space, the central ramp, and the storage facilities on the perimeter. And here we have a corridor that separates these two and allows these to have a relationship in the installation and disinstallation of the shows. Here we're having this is an image of the entrance as we're walking in at ground level. And here the ramp, which is ramping down to the permanent exhibitions. Above, we are seeing what will be the social areas. This is the ground level, and the central light, which can be controlled mechanically with motorized louvers that can control the amount of light that comes in. 100% of the building, the light can be controlled. This is an image from the lowest level, where we're seeing the structure, the light from the center part of the ramp, and the structure coming through. There's another image of that. So, as I mentioned before, the ceilings we have concrete ceilings that support our lighting, and the floors, which are removable panels that give us access to electrical, air, and other installations. Those floors are, again, they're about 3 to 4 feet of air we have below the floor, and in some cases, quite a bit more that give us access to those areas. Here are other images. One of the stairs that goes down, in addition to the ramp space, there an overall view. The building at all times tries to relate the different programs, the social with the permanent, with the temporary collections, and not divorce them in the corners. Here you also see the patios, which are meant for hanging vegetation, yet to be installed there. Those as well can be blocked off from light. So the building does have that capacity to change as needed for its requirements. This is the second level above grade. And here we have different programs, the upper level of the auditorium, a library, a restaurant and cafeteria area, and a flexible area, along with an outdoor theater. That would be at that level. The panels which are open with those conditions. This is one of the areas that gives out onto the front facade. The ramp that does come up to the roof terrace. We have 2 ramps in the corners. We'll have an image of those. The auditorium that connects the ground level to the social area. And then finally, around the social area, we have this concrete block system, these concrete blocks which can be oriented both for light and for air. This again helps cool the building, which is one of our main concerns, which is once again why we buried 70% of the building. But the levels which are above grade, all of the glass is protected with this sun and wind screen. Here on the right-hand side, we're seeing the ramps that would lead us to the roof terrace. Again, these floors are floors that contain electricity and other services, water, etc. As we're moving around the upper level of the building, the patios, which would have the hanging gardens, which are meant for the hanging gardens. And at the 4 levels, at each level of the building, the restaurant, the auditorium, the library, these levels do have a terrace that they can go out onto, which is prepared for vegetation. And puts the building in contact with the different parts of the site. It's treated equally all around. We have the Temple of the Sun, the Pacific, our industrial area, and the neighborhoods of Julio Citello and Villa Salvador. When we're thinking about the facade, we thought a lot about building blocks and how this construction, how we could use these elements to build a facade that could open and that can close. Here are some images of how that is. We actually, as we were building the building, we adjusted the blocks according to the wind and the sun as on site. So that's how those positions were eventually decided. Here we're seeing the facade, the gardens, and the relationship yet to be. Sorry?
The canchas.
These are the canchas, what we call the canchas, or the terraces. Its openings and the facade in relationship to the dunes. Here we're at the roof level. Again, these gardens, the idea of these gardens to be once again in relationship to the gardens, the surrounding gardens, some yet to be planted and some existing. Relationship with the dunes. Here's some images of those gardens and the building in its site. A few images of the landscape project, since we're not able to show it in photographs.
2 hectares of landscape design integrated to the structure of the building.
So these are the gardens that will eventually occur on all of the levels. As I said before, all of the horizontal levels are planted, and aside from offering the advantages of the vegetation, they give the building a very necessary thermal insulation as we try to keep the energy costs down. We'll go very quickly through a project we did in Venice, the last project, and we'll end up with a very short video. I see we're with short video. This project is interwoven. In the last Venice Biennale, Hashim Sarkis asked, how will we live together? There were 5 areas. For us, it was as new households. And what was important for us was to understand the relationship within the households and also the relationship between households. Building, for the most part, and especially where we live, is auto construction, and so at least 70 to 80% of building is built by people themselves. And what do people build with? They build really with blocks. Whether it was stone blocks or adobe blocks or brick blocks, or even today more concrete blocks, brick blocks. So one of the things that I guess the installation tries to do is to rethink the basic building blocks and to see what advantages we can obtain from rethinking those blocks in terms of light, wind, and visual references. Here was the installation within the Arsenale. Arsenale, as we know, is a structure you can't really touch. So we have these 2 freestanding X's, which just with their gravity, about 17 metric tons, they sit on the ground and very lightly they clasp the ceiling at the top with a series of clamps. Here's the relationship in plan. The installation is about 8 meters tall. It was very important for us to do a one-to-one installation, and rather than, I guess, show through drawings or photographs this idea of rethinking blocks, how we could do that within installation itself. Some images, how these blocks, we did have a plan of how these blocks would be set up. Obviously, there's some strategic openings that were placed to relate to the Arsenal itself as a 1-to-1 installation, the column capitals, certain sites, but a part of the installation was also decided, as you know, on site when we were there for a couple of weeks setting this up. I'll go quickly through the images. I think the video will explain this a bit more. It's over 2,200 Paguana blocks. It's a steel structure. It's a wood that is from the Amazon, which is discarded. It is a fast-growing type of wood. It's a medium density, fast-growing, and it's often discarded in the process to get to other trees. It's also used as balsa to transport other things. So using this material, I mean, it'd be a much longer conversation to get into the sustainability of it, but there's also comment on sustainable practices and wood in the Amazon. Some more images. Of the blocks is rotated. There were many parts of it that were designed before we got there that we left as is. Quite a bit that we adjusted on site, and also parts of the installation that were left to chance and were set up as the workers. These are the technical drawings that we went to Venice with, putting this together. We had to produce documents that would be easy for people who really never would receive this installation without us being there, being able to unpack the 17 crates with a series of drawings and with over 2,000 blocks and metal pieces, and somehow put this together in this specific area of the Arsenale. So again, this rethinking of blocks, whether it's concrete blocks, adobe blocks, which is so much a part of our culture. The blocks are asymmetrical in plan. There's only one plan for the entire installation, and there are 4 different heights. And with those 4 different heights, the entire installation is produced. Also very important was how we would laminate the pieces together to maximize the amount of wood. And there was a process of making these blocks as efficient as possible. So that was, again, part of the process. So our packing crates, and I think perhaps we can show the
video.
We can share the video, and I think that will make it, I think that will help understand the scale a bit more. We did leave some blocks. People, as they went through the exhibition, even though we were in COVID and you weren't really supposed to touch the works, people did end up moving the blocks, and so the installation did change day to day. And kids, obviously, if you leave blocks lying around on the ground, they will intervene with them, and they did. So that was
Very nice.
so that was very nice. Perhaps you could share the screen.
Yes, I will share.
So again, a quick video, and I think there we can end.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. So first, if anybody has questions, please write the questions in the chat and we'll try to read them as we go along. Second, let me tell you that Dean El-Huri was very impressed, but he had to go to another meeting. So he just signed off 30 seconds ago. Now, to me, that Biennale was one of the driest biennales in the history of the Venice Biennale. And there were a couple of moments, particularly in the Arsenale, that were extraordinary. And I didn't know that this was your project. But to me, this was one of those moments. To me, this one and the Chilean Pavilion made my trip to the Biennale. The rest was, I mean, sincerely not very motivating. I mean, in general, but this is, I mean, something else. A question, is there any relationship between the bare geography of Peru, that desert, I mean, relentless desert in Peru, and the stark minimalism of your buildings? Have you thought about it in those terms, or not at all? Is this pure coincidence?
Joyce, you want to start?
You know, we had born in Peru, no, and that has a lot of a deep history, no. So in my case, from when I was a child of 6 years, I used to travel a lot throughout all Peru, no, and for me it's like very common to visit archaeological sites, and for me this relationship of pre-Hispanic and Inca architecture, the sensibility that this architecture has with the environments, with the surroundings, are for me super important. This connection, no, to the landscape, and I think that in our projects we are we have this kind of worries, no, about integration, connectivity, and we try to keep the things simple. I think that a good plaza, a good patio, a good platform could change completely a specific reality, no? So it's, of course, it's very connected to Peruvian historical architecture. Yes. I don't feel comfortable with the minimalism thing. I think that we try to do, you know, whatever is needed to transformation, no?
I think it's, I understand Alexia's point about minimalism. I think it's a good question, Jaime. I mean, we do, you know, there's so much visual noise. You know Latin America well. I mean, in the areas that we, you know, that live in a city like Lima, but there's also these incredible landscapes like the desert. I think, but I'm going to be very specific in answering so I think for the students to understand, I think it's, when we have a project like the museum, economy is very important. I mean, we spent over half of our budget on the structure itself. As you know, Peru's a seismic. We have a seismic culture. You know, I didn't go into the details, but it's, you know, we spent probably 50 to 55% of our budget on the structure, another 25 to 30% on what you might traditionally call installation mechanicals, MEPs, and really the rest is just closing the building up and very few finishes in that sense. So it's almost like an infrastructure waiting for things to happen to it. So economy is most definitely something that, influences, how I think you can approach a project like the Muna. I think perhaps if you were to see the projects, you might not consider them as minimalist as they seem. Perhaps in the last two projects that comes up, in the Casa Vertical isn't that by any means, but I think it's a good point.
Yeah, and regarding the so-called canchas, can you please explain to our students what those are? Because I don't think they're familiar with that word.
Okay, canchas, we were very inspired of the cancha system, no? That is an Inca pattern,
Plaza?
pattern that is a courtyard contained by 4 volumes, no? So in this way, the void is connected vertically with the sky and with the surroundings. So, but then we made these canchas completely unroofed, no? To generate a close relationship with the dunes, with the dune that surround the building and all the views, no? To the Temple of the Sun, to the Huachaques, to the islands, Villa El Salvador and Julio Ceteio neighborhoods. No, we really believe that these platforms that are big scale platforms with gardens, no, will bring the conditions to be as the public to be connected with this landscape, no. And from the perimeter belt, this perimeter belt with the facade of blocks, from there you also can stay there and can gather there, no, and see from there all the views, the panoramic views, no. It's beautiful because the building in the upper level really is completely open, no. You have a lot of transitional spaces between the inside void and the terraces, no. On the outside.
And one final question, because the students have to go to studio and so do you. What is now that you're working together, how is the process of design? Who takes the lead? How do you work? I mean, how do you work really in your office? What is the structure of your office? How many employees? Who's in charge of what? How do you do it? Because it's difficult to have a partner. I mean, I've tried many times and I failed miserably. So that's why I'm by myself now. Yeah.
We fight a lot.
I would say everybody does everything, unless it's a very small project, a very tiny project, then I might say, I'll just do this project, or Alexia will say, I'm going to do this project. And at that point, they're the lead, and then, we're looking over each other's shoulders. But in general, we sort of do everything. And if we don't agree on something, we continue talking about it until we do agree on it. I would say, and this might help clarify your question, is that our projects, it's not a simple drawing that then it gets developed and then it becomes a building set of drawings and then it's built. I would say the anteproyecto, or the design development, is what you might say in the States, takes a very long time for us. So that's a very long period. It's not schematic in that sense. You know, so of a project like the Alcanfores project, you might have over 30 or 40 models of that building, or the Victor Moto, you know, 30 or 40 models of that project, and many different design iterations. So the project really does move, you know.
But
And
Jaime, we are the principals of León Marcial, but we have a very strong team. So we used to work a lot together, no? And we have like a very continuous brainstorm with a lot of discussion, you know, but around physicality of the project, no? Not only about a theoretical discussion, no? It's a kind of exploring materiality to get to that point that we are sure that we are doing something that will change the built environment, no? That is our main thing, no? For example, and we are very interested in how to understand the pre-existing urban, built environment, built and unbuilt environments. No, we are very interested to address that. And
we can tell, yeah, we can tell the vertical house and the Alcanfores building, I mean, could be paradigms of Latin American architecture, of good Latin American architecture. They're exceptional buildings, yeah, exceptional buildings.
For instance, Jaime, in those projects and in actually all the projects we do, and I mean, the studio right now has probably over, I don't know, maybe 12 to 15 projects in construction, and we've really selected, you know, what we've shown here today. But one of the things that we do is that increasingly the studio, and this is, I think, important for the students, is that we're trying to develop our own system of materials here, working with what we have, and we're not buying. I mean, here, if you want to make a window, you design a window, you draw a window, and you build it with your metal worker. You're not importing a window from somewhere else. So we're not really, we're trying to increasingly not rely on technologies that we have to import, but really,
and
you know,
we are
we're
working with the
here.
artisans' knowledge,
Yeah.
gardeners.
In Alcanfores, for instance, the first balconies, you know, we built the first balconies. I built with the main builder there. We built the carpentry setup, you know, a 2-ton thing, and we, you know, we curved the wood, and, you know, we're there on site trying to figure out how these things work, and, you know, working with the people to develop these things. And you realize that what looked like sophisticated technologies are actually very simple. The whole handrail, which might look like something done with laser cutting, is done with some guys that had a hammer, a drill, and a welding tool. That's it. And, you know, once we realized that we had to give them 1-to-1 scale drawings, because they were trying to, you know, match the curves with pieces of paper like this. And so when we realized that that wasn't going to work, we just gave them, because, you know, they're not working with computers or anything, they're just working with really hammers. So we gave them 1-to-1 size drawings, and they would just bang and build according to that. So, you know, you adapt to the technologies, I think, that exist. That's
Yeah, no, and that's how great architecture comes about. Locally, we have now one of the young professors here, Christopher Meyer, and his wife are doing something that is very similar to what you're doing with wood, and the results are extraordinary. Anyways, so thank you very much for joining us today, and for teaching at the University of Miami. We're so proud that you're part of our semester this semester, and we wish you the best of luck in your careers and in your projects with our students, and looking forward to the final presentation on December the 7th.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.